People running scared as another letter of the Greek alphabet runs amok across our media.
We were told it was inevitable, and the prediction has been realised. The dangerous new strain of COVID, known as Omicron, is in Sydney.
Dangerous new strain? Says who? Not who. They don't know if it's dangerous yet, Pete. But carry on with the fear-mongering to try to save your dying media channel by scaring people into watching that trash you call news. Nope, Omicron is not as dangerous as the lunatic Australian mainstream media would have you believe. We'll tell you the truth about it in a moment. This week in episode 77, our final show for 2021 before we head into our summer best-of series. There will be 3 of those episodes every Wednesday until December 22, when episode 80 will be our final show for the year, and a final show with Discernible, sadly. Our energy expert Ben Beattie will join me later on in this show to talk about hydrogen power. And I'm sorry, folks, but it's not the great answer to all of our troubles that we have been told.
That's a very energy-intensive way of producing hydrogen. And in fact, the energy you get out of that process is less than the energy you put into it.
Also in the show, Penny Wong speaks nonsense about China. Utter nonsense. I ponder the philosophical question, what is money? In a pre-Christmas ramble and self-indulgence. And don't forget, we have a few more shows this year that will be the best of specials throughout December before I disappear completely for 5 months to run my campaign for the Liberal Democrats for the Brisbane seat of Ryan, which I am running to win. And now that I'm a candidate, I have to say this to keep the bureaucrats in Canberra happy. Ready? Written and authorised by D. Coory for the Liberal Democrats of Wrongpilly, Queensland. There you go. Just in case you missed my announcement in last week's show, yes, I am having a crack at politics. I have more management experience and training than the clowns in there already, and I certainly couldn't do any worse. We need fewer career politicians in Canberra and more real people with real-world experience. I'll still be on social media a lot, sprouting my views and showing you bits of the campaign, so please make sure you're following me on Facebook and YouTube at The Other Side Australia, as we won't be on the Discernible platform next year. So I'm opening up my personal Facebook page too for the election campaign, so you can friend me there at Damian Coory. And I just want to give a shout out to Discernible, to Matt, to James for all their incredible hard work and creativity making this show look fantastic every week through 2021. They have produced more than 60 episodes of The Other Side this year. It's a monumental effort. And I certainly couldn't have done it without you guys, and I'm not sure how I'm going to continue to do it if we do come back in May, but we'll see how everything pans out in 2022. So, nearly 90% of Australians are now fully vaccinated. 90%. Why then do we have any COVID restrictions or regulations at all? Why are we watching as Victoria passes this draconian, ridiculous pandemic bill? Oh yeah, I forgot, because our hospitals are in such a mess. Our nurses and doctors are so overworked that they can't handle any more than a handful of people in ICU. One ICU patient? We're full. Sorry, go to the next hospital. And why would that be, do you think? Who's accountable for that? State governments, yes. And we have a new variant, ladies and gentlemen. It's called Omicron, another letter of the Greek alphabet. But they skipped a couple of letters. Did you notice that? Me neither. They skipped mu, apparently, because they felt it would sound too much like a new variant. A mu variant. Yeah, anyway. And then they skipped the next letter, Z, because it's spelled XI, which is the Roman way of writing the Chinese name Xi, which is the surname of President Xi Jinping of China. And they, well, didn't want to offend him. How nice. Not offending an evil communist dictator. Really, where would we be without the nice manners of the United Nations and the WHO? So while Channel 2, 7, 9 and 10 are busy scaring you out of your wits so you'll watch their god-awful news shows, here's COVID YouTube guru Dr. John Campbell to explain what the actual doctors think.
This is the Omicron variant, as we know, the B11529. Now, we want to think about the people in the world that know most about this are the doctors that have actually treated the variant so far, and there's 2 of these in South Africa. So these are the ones to get to. Now, this is Dr. Angelique Coetzee, South African Medical Association. I think she's the boss of that. Also a practicing clinician doctor in South Africa. First to raise the alarm on the new Omicron variant. So she's in an ideal position to comment. Direct quotes, this is a storm in a teacup. Good. Why everyone up in arms about this, she's saying. So far, what we have seen is very mild cases.
And here she actually is saying it, the chairwoman of the South African Medical Association, the SAMA.
More patients coming in with the same sort of symptoms. They all tested positive. I alerted the advisory committee of the minister on the vaccines because I'm part of that committee, and that's why it's easy for me to say to them, listen, something is wrong. I have seen today a picture that doesn't fit in with Delta. And then the beginning of this past week, it came out that this is the new variant going around. What we are seeing clinically in South Africa, and remember, I'm at the epicenter, that's where I'm practicing, is extremely mild. For us, that's mild cases. We haven't admitted anyone. I spoke to other colleagues of mine, the same picture.
That's Angelique Coetzee, chairperson of the South African Medical Association, speaking to BBC Television this week. Now, despite all of this, bureaucrats and politicians all over the world, not just here in Australia, they're slamming borders shut to South Africa because, well, that's all bureaucrats know how to do. And because this variant could give you a very, very nasty headache.
Basically, she's saying these are very mild cases that they're seeing. Headache does seem to be a feature. What is different is the extreme tiredness. So a lot of people have been going to their doctors in South Africa saying, I'm just extremely tired. And they turn out to test positive for COVID. Mostly men under 40s that they're seeing at the moment in South Africa. Interesting. I really think the vaccine plays a role here. Breakthrough infections, but very, very mild.
Dr. Campbell says another South African doctor from Soweto, where vaccination is very, very low, says there's been a shift in the age of people affected to a younger demographic. And there are some concerns that Omicron could be bad for other reasons.
Now, Professor Ravi Gupta, University of Cambridge, Beta, which of course was the original South Africa variant, was all immune escape and nothing else. So we're worried about it causing immune escape from people that have been infected and from the vaccines. Delta had infectivity and modest immune escape. This has the potential. This potentially has both to high degrees. So it's got potentially the worst characteristics of both. So again, to bring more balance, the theoretical reasons why it could be bad because it could have immune escape and high infectivity. And of course, the reason that the world didn't get a beta pandemic was because the Delta variant outcompeted it. So the Delta variant actually did us a favour in getting rid of the beta. South Africa has got very good surveillance, excellent transparency. If only all countries in the world had the same transparency as the South African science does. So congratulations, South Africa. They also have excellent data gathering facilities, so they will have definitive answers on this soon, within about 2 weeks. And I would predict that South Africa is going to be the first country in the world to give definitive information on how much more transmissible, how much more pathogenic Omicron is.
Dr. Campbell says it's likely that Omicron will replace Delta as the main global pandemic strain, and fingers crossed it'll continue to be extremely mild symptomatically and could signal the end of the whole problem. Of course, you can expect our politicians to be very restrained in reacting to the thing. And of course, the Australian media won't be beating up the story at all. Well, hot on the heels of former Prime Minister Paul Keating's ridiculous comments on China recently that completely ignored the reality of China's recent aggression towards Taiwan and ignored Hong Kong and ignored the Uyghurs and ignored the very clear fact that it is a totalitarian dictatorship with zero respect for people's liberties and lives, for that matter. We now have Labor's Penny Wong trying to tell us that China is not a big threat to Australia.
The consequences of a kinetic conflict over Taiwan, with the potential for escalation, would be catastrophic for humanity. So when Peter Dutton talks about it being inconceivable that Australia would not join a war over Taiwan, he is wildly out of step with the strategy long adopted by Australia and our principal ally. Amping up the prospect of war against a superpower is the most dangerous election tactic in Australian history.
Election tactic? Peter Dutton's comments are an election tactic? Of course, the left will just lap up Wong's criticism of Dutton and continue to treat someone who appears to be acting as an apologist for a murderous regime, Paul Keating, as some kind of ideological god. But Sky News commentator Chris Kenny put the absurdity of Labor's position in full light.
Has she not seen what China has said about Taiwan of late? What it's said about teaching Australia a lesson in any military conflict? Has Wong not seen what China has done in the South China Sea, what it's done to democracy in Hong Kong, how it threatens Taiwan with military hardware? I don't know what's wrong with just backing Australia. China breaches international law. It's a communist dictatorship that tramples on human rights. It's punished Australia overtly, economically, because we dared to ask for an investigation into the origins of a global pandemic. And Labor slams Australia?
Yep, that's Chris Kenny on Sky News. Peter Dutton told the Today Show that Paul Keating's comments at the National Press Club earlier this month were perhaps, unwise.
Look, I think it's a really serious issue because this is a former Prime Minister and he's out bagging our country at every opportunity. And the last security briefing that Paul Keating received would have been in 1996 when the Motorola StarTAC was still current. It was, almost 10 years before the iPhone. So I don't know how he's commenting on contemporary issues when he's still reading black and white, films from the 70s. So, I mean, it shows weakness within the Labor Party because Anthony Albanese, has hidden himself under the covers and won't come out to criticise him. And I think it's really damaging. I think Paul Keating has no idea what he's talking about in terms of the contemporary situation with regards to China, and let's hope he doesn't repeat it.
Now, it's also important to remember that Paul Keating is a member of the China Development Bank's International Advisory Board. China Development Bank is a huge bank, big bank in China, and Paul Keating's on that advisory board. Now, it is just an advisory board. We're not suggesting anything, but all Chinese corporations do have very heavy government ties, and maybe, it's not healthy for Australia's national security or interests that a former Prime Minister should be in this particular role, particularly a former Prime Minister who holds such contempt for our British heritage and history. And he seems extremely quick to just turn a blind eye to all of China's misdeeds in order to influence public opinion and policy towards this now quite aggressive totalitarian communist state. As I mentioned earlier, the other side will be sadly leaving the Discernable platform at the end of 2021, hopefully returning somewhere in 2022 after the election on our own platforms, in which I'll be now running in the federal election, of course, as a Liberal Democrats candidate for the seat of Ryan in Brisbane. And I'm running to win because we have to bring real experience from outside of the political inner circle of Canberra elites to save this country. During the election campaign, I'll be posting lots of random short videos and commenting on stuff. So right now, if you'd please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at The Other Side Oz, and or on Facebook at facebook.com/TheOtherSideOz, or just search us up. Then be sure to click follow on Twitter to follow us and like on the Facebook page. The Facebook page looks like this. Now, we do strongly recommend that you continue to follow Discernible. Matt's still going to be producing some great stuff on both YouTube and Facebook. But if you're landing on a page that says Discernible, it isn't actually The Other Side anymore. So we do need you to go onto our own separate page. So you've got to find those pages. Be sure to stay in touch with me throughout 2022. It's going to be a lot of fun. During the campaign, I'll be posting behind the scenes stuff so you can see what a campaign is like. And then if you could kindly subscribe to us on YouTube, our YouTube page looks like this one. And again, you need to find our page, not our folder on the Discernible page. You've got to find the Other Side Australia page and subscribe directly to that and click the bell so you get notified when we put up new content. I really look forward to keeping in touch throughout 2022. And don't forget that you can always join our VIP WhatsApp list and have links sent to your phone when I upload new content. Just drop us an email at theothersideost@gmail.com, theothersideost@gmail.com, and we'll send you the link to opt in on WhatsApp. Okay, it is our last real-time show for 2021. So I want to kind of talk about something that I've always wanted to talk about on this show, but it's a little academic, but I'm going to make it very, very simple and clear because I had to so that I could understand it. And that is the rather concerning way that Aussies look upon successful people, rich people, and the way we look at money in general. Now, there seems to be this idea in the modern world that money is the root of all evil, that money in and of itself is a bad thing. That if your boss, for example, cares a lot about the money, looks at the money and the numbers all the time, that she or he, doesn't care about the people and the service that you're bringing. That if a politician worries about the economy, then they don't care about people's health. Now, this is a myth that a lot of people in our society really do buy into. And I reckon it's because we don't understand what money is. So I'm going to try and explain what money is. And it is a myth that the left of politics, the Labor Party, the Greens, constantly takes advantage of our misunderstanding of to win support, right? So they'll say, tax the rich. And because we don't really understand how the economy works, or we don't really understand what money is, or how the rich got rich, or whatever, we tend to go, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, so I'll vote for those guys. They sound like the good guys. When in actual fact, they're fiddling around in the background, spending like crazy and raising debt, as are all governments at the moment of all political persuasions. But I think it's time that in Australia we put an end to this misperception about money. So let's start with this money is the root of all evil thing, right? Apparently comes from the Bible. The Bible doesn't actually say that money is the root of all evil, though. It says that the love of money is the root of all evil. I'm not even sure that's true, though. So let's have a look at it. What is money? Money is nothing more than the points system. It's just a points system that we use to measure value in agreement in our society, right? So by assigning a value to different things, I don't need to carry around a pig to trade with your cow, to trade for some bread every time I want to make a sandwich. I can just take the money I got from the pig and buy the bread with it from the baker. I can store money so I can use it later. I can time shift the value. I can take $100 and turn it into 10 different purchases for $10. But who decides what a dollar is worth? Who decides, how much of a ham sandwich it's going to buy for you? Well, in a free market capitalist system, the market decides. Okay. Now, in a communist system, despite the best efforts of the left-wing elitists who think they can run a whole country and economy on their own, the market still ultimately decides what a dollar or a yuan or a ruble is worth. Now, the value of a dollar is determined by all of us through millions of decisions that we make every day as a group. So who sets the prices for everything? Well, the market does, right? We decide with our feet and our stomachs whether a Big Mac is worth $7. If we don't buy a Big Mac for $7 or $9 or whatever they are now, then McDonald's has a few choices. It can lower the price to $6.50 and see if we'll buy it at that price, or it can offer a higher quality product and still charge $7. But they've got to be able to compete to survive. If they charge too much more than Hungry Jack's, or the Burger King makes a better quality burger for the same price, then Macca's will go out of business. So it's the competitive free market that sets the prices. It's us. We set the prices. Now, if your boss cares a lot about money, it might have something to do with the fact that he'd like to pay you more, or grow the business, or hire more people, or branch out into new markets. Or maybe she's just worried that she won't be able to keep paying you next year if she doesn't meet budget this year. So don't get mad at your boss if they seem obsessed with the budgets and the money and the economy of the company. Hiring people is tough and it's scary. I don't know too many small business people who haven't had sleepless nights about meeting payroll at least one time or another. So how do we get more money? How do we get more money? We get more money by adding more value to the community. Sounds nice, right? If you add value to society, you're going to get more money. Unless you're engaged in plunder, ripping off the system, but that's more likely to happen when government gets involved in the market than when it stays out of the market. A smart society doesn't look at rich people and feel angry or envious. And this is a really big problem in Australia, and it's going to be the end of us if we don't change our attitudes. A smart society looks at its rich and successful people and says, wow, they must have added a lot of value. Now they've been rewarded with people buying the stuff because they like it. So that's good. That's the market, right? That means they now have control over more money, these rich people, and they could use it to help create more value, which is something that they're obviously good at, right? I mean, if Steve Jobs had been born in China and not in America, he would have maybe, had so much of his wealth taken off him or felt that his property rights were so unreliable under a communist legal system that he might have just stopped at the iPod and not bothered about the iPhone. I mean, he was rich enough already, right? Just go to the beach. But he wanted to keep creating and keep adding value. So what do rich people do with all their money? Well, if they leave it in the bank, they actually get no return on it. In fact, over time, because of inflation, it'll actually be worth less and less. So they've got to invest it. Now, some of them spend a fair bit of it, and that's kind of good too, because it goes out into the world and creates jobs and supports businesses if they spend it. But mostly they invest most of it. And since they're the ones in our society who seem to know how to make businesses work well, they get to decide how they're going to invest their money. It's a pretty good system, really. And this is why property rights, the right to hold property, money and assets of all kinds as yours and not have anyone or a government steal them from you, is so very important to the wealth of our nation. This idea that the left peddle, that the poor are poor because some rich person came along and took all their money, just isn't right. It's complete nonsense. It assumes that there is this limited pool of money, that nobody could ever add to that pool of money and make it bigger, make the pie bigger, as they say, through, creative ideas, hard work, and service. The left believe the pie is this big, and we need to fight about how we divide it up. Capitalism and free competitive markets say, no, you can make the pie bigger, and maybe the slices will be uneven, but even the poor people will get a bigger slice. Okay? So capitalism and free competitive markets are simply the best system on earth for ensuring maximum wealth for everyone. And the left hate that idea, right? They hate the idea that everyone gets richer when you grow the pie. They love to say, oh no, that doesn't actually happen. There's no trickle down. They invented the term trickle down economics, by the way, if you ever hear that one. And they claim that people on the right are saying that the wealth trickles down. It doesn't trickle down from the rich. It never was meant to. It's meant to grow the pie of the whole country, and then everybody gets a bigger slice than they had before, even if some people's slice is a bit less than other people's slices. Equality is bad, actually, because equality rewards people for not doing any more than the next person. So could you imagine walking into a classroom and saying to the kids, hey, everyone's going to get a B for this assignment. Doesn't matter how much work you put into it. Doesn't matter if you bludge and don't do anything. You're all going to get a B because we like a nice, equal society. Well, what's going to happen to all the good kids, the smart kids, right? Are they going to put in the effort anymore? Probably not. Okay, so that's basically what socialism thinks will happen. That would be a good thing if we're all equal. Well, no, let's have a really big pie. Let's give the people who produced the pie, made it bigger, a little bit of a bigger slice, and then everybody else gets a big slice too because, well, it's much bigger than that little pie we had before. So, socialism and centralized control of economies run by a small group of elitist bureaucrats who think that they could possibly know best. Like, let's just get rid of all the rich people and what do we do instead? Oh, I know, we'll appoint our own bunch of 10 elite people and we'll let them make all the decisions for everybody. Oh, that's just a fantastic system. That's much fairer. Not. So that's socialism, right? To think that a small group of elitist bureaucrats could possibly know better than millions of people voting with their dollars in a free market, a competitive free market, wow. I mean, what an ego you would have to think that you could rule over an economy and a society and control everything like that. What vanity, what self-delusion do you need to think that you could make it all happen and everyone should do what you say? It's the same kind of delusion you need to sustain the view that most people on the left have about themselves, that they alone are the kind and compassionate ones in society who care about the poor and the disadvantaged and the sick, and they don't care so much about money. Try setting up a charity to help the poor and the disadvantaged and the sick without any money, or in a country where the people are mostly poor. Good luck with that. In our country, we already tax the rich a lot. We tax them a lot more than everyone else. We expect the rich to give back more to look after those who can't look after themselves, and that's maybe as it should be. But the value that the rich create and can pay in taxes to fund welfare and other services, it isn't infinite. Whenever you take money or services from the government, someone has had to have produced something or done something to pay for that and then given that over to the government or had it taken from them by law as taxes, okay? No left-wing theory can change that reality of life. We can't just keep saying we should spend more on this worthy cause and that worthy cause, and anyone who says we shouldn't is greedy and mean and uncaring, evil, right-wing fat cat. Our country can only survive if more people are producing value than are taking it. And whenever we take, if we have to, that's fine. Sometimes in your life, you're going to probably need a handout from the government. You're going to need help to get through bad patches. And that's what a nice, good society does. You have a little bit of welfare. But when we take, we should be mindful that we're giving back, or at least trying to, if we can. And if we can't, no problem. People used to feel some shame or guilt about going on the dole, for example. And shame and guilt are now considered, useless emotions. But are they? You shouldn't feel shame or guilt about it if you really need it as a stopgap, right? I said that, like if you need this money, you need a government hand, no shame or guilt necessary. Or if you legitimately can't work or find work. But taking the dole as if you're entitled to it when you actually could be working, that is something to feel some shame about in a healthy, functional society. Only those who really can't do anything to help themselves should receive charity from the rest of us. The other thing to remember is that if you keep on taxing a country's producers, the people who create stuff, the rich ones, then they're going to go somewhere else. Or worse, they'll give up and retire. And then there'll be no one left to tax, and no production, no value creation to take any tax from. And that is how countries go down the tube, like Venezuela did recently. Here's the data on who pays the most income tax in Australia. There are fewer than 15 million income taxpayers in Australia out of nearly 26 million people. So that 15 million have to create enough value to take care of the other 11 million, as well as themselves. And we have all sorts of social norms and conventions and deals that get done to work out this distribution of labour. One partner may go out and earn the money while the other one stays at home and works and looks after the kids to enable that. Parents take care of their kids as a payment up to the next generation, having benefited from the one before. Out of those 15 million taxpayers, the top 1%, that's about 110,000 people, pay 17% of all the tax. Those in the top tax bracket who earn more than $180,000 a year pay a third of all the income tax in Australia. Now, income tax only makes up 2/5 of all the tax in the country, though. Company taxes, other federal taxes, state and local taxes, and good old GST make up the rest. So we need our companies to make reasonable profits so we can tax them. And we need to keep creating the private sector jobs that pay for the government jobs, public service jobs, and welfare. Now, whether the way we take tax in Australia is fair or not is a very complicated issue. But one thing is for sure, nobody has the right to waste tax money. Nobody has the right to take taxes and use the money for anything that we all wouldn't agree is universally beneficial. And unfortunately, that's not what's happening. Governments obviously always think they are worth more and should be allowed to do more stuff, and they spend more and more and have more and more and more power and control. That's what they want, that's what they think. And that's why every now and again, people have got to rise up and say enough. And this coming federal election is that election. It's time to say enough. You have enough power for now, dear governments and public servants. We need to start supporting the people through the free market. Let them make the millions of small decisions every day that add up to make our country work really well. Maybe we'll get better schools if we hand over to private investors who are teachers and principals and administrators and can deliver a great service cheaply because they're forced to compete for students and resources and talent. Maybe we'll get better hospitals if we hand over to private companies run by people who actually know what they're doing. Doctors, nurses, medical administrators, competing to provide the best treatment and get the best patient outcomes possible. Sure, we need safety nets, especially for things as important as education and health. But is the government running almost everything in these areas really working? Were those lockdowns in the Labor states that went on forever actually about protecting you from COVID? Or were they about protecting the hospital systems that have fallen into ruin because of terrible management by bureaucrats, politicians and unions to stop those hospitals from being overwhelmed? Is that why we really locked down? It's interesting to note that Dan Andrews was the Minister for Health in Victoria before he was Premier. How did he let things get so bad? Who did he refuse to stand up to so as to protect his own political career? What decisions were not made in the best long-term interests of patients and the people of Victoria? It's interesting to note that Queensland and WA have had ambulance ramping and long elective surgery waiting lists for a very long time, long before COVID. And they, along with Victoria, were the toughest lockdown states by far. The last time Queensland's hospitals ran efficiently was under Campbell Newman's LNP government, the one that was brave enough, or some might say stupid enough, to take on the unions and the public servants and simply demand better outcomes for the customers, the patients, you. Well, that just saw Campbell Newman get turfed out of office, didn't it? While Labor lied that he just didn't care about the people and only cared about money. Interesting, isn't it? So the next time you hear a Labor politician or a union cry that, oh, it's all for the people, it's all for compassion, and because, we're the caring side of politics. Ask yourself, what do they really care about? Are they really motivated to get the best outcomes for patients and our kids and the poor and the needy? Or are they mainly motivated by other things, like power and control and the ego and thinking they always know what's best for everybody? I think Anthony Albanese and Christina Keneally and Tanya Plibersek know full well that a lot of people are not so well educated about economics and will always fall for that simple Robin Hood story. Steal from the rich, give to the poor, and money bad, rich people bad line. And they keep churning it out every federal election. And I think they play that to their advantage, to fool us into voting for them and their mates. Well, I think Aussies are getting smarter. More and more of us are waking up. We're understanding economics better. I certainly am. Money isn't the root of all evil. It's needed to do good. Our society creates a certain amount of value every year, measured by what economists call our gross domestic product, or GDP. And the question is, who are the best people to manage the spending of that value that's being created? Should it be business-minded people who know how to get maximum results for customers out of limited resources and are held accountable every day by the fact that they could go broke tomorrow if they screw up? Or is it public servants and politicians, bureaucrats playing politics who've been handed a blank check and cushy jobs with minimal accountability, maybe once every 4 years? I think I know which group I would prefer. I'm not buying the left's nice-sounding lies anymore. Are you? Well, joining us for the last time in 2021 is Mr. Ben Beattie, our energy expert. Ben, thanks for coming on the show for the last time for the year.
Thanks, Damian. It's been good.
Let's talk a little bit about this whole net zero plan that came out of COP26 for Australia. Well, it didn't really come out of COP26. It's been around for a while, but where are we at with ScoMo's net zero plan?
Well, you're accurately describing it as a net zero plan by 2050. It's equally derided by both sides of politics, which is interesting. It's quite often said that if the left and the right both hate it, then you must be pretty close to right. This might be the exception.
Okay.
It's so I'm going to be a little bit harsh on it, but I'm also going to maybe possibly put it into context from ScoMo's perspective, which I think is important overall.
Okay. All right. So what is it?
So I had a little, while I was thinking about today's show, I wrote this question. So if you had a marginal Conservative government elected against the odds by a dwindling Conservative vote in key regions, if you're under assault from left-wing activists, and in that bucket I put the media, lobby groups, political factions, the UN, the US, the EU, academia, corporates, and the scientific community, and you were under assault from that lot to capitulate to the UN globalist agenda, how would you handle it?
Yeah, I think it's fair to be a little bit sympathetic to Mr. Morrison, maybe. I've been a bit harsh on him.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, he's also under assault.
Pressure.
he's under assault from internally inside his own political party. If you look at the state levels, I mean, you've got examples of Matt Keane, who's now the treasurer of Australia's largest economy within the state level. Anyway,
I think you've got to come. This is why you've got to come out and take a stand, and you've got to show leadership, and you've got to have a position, and you've got to say, "Look, guys, appreciate that this is a global problem. If you feel that way, our view is that we can't impact that with a reduction in our own coal exports or coal production. It's not going to help the world. Take a clear position, take a clear stand, and stick by it, and watch the Australian public follow you. I think if you put your case clearly and sensibly and consistently,
which is how he got elected in 2019, right? He was everywhere, right. Yeah. And he was consistent, and he had a pretty weak opposition, to be honest. But the opposition was
they're no stronger
pushing
now.
climate. They were pushing climate change and tax changes, which would certainly detract from pensioners' incomes and investment income. But Morrison's net zero, I think, it's certainly not a line in the sand, and it's not pushing back that hard against the net zero side of politics, but it's not giving everything away. So let's run through a couple of items. So he's promised $20 billion over the period to 2030, or sorry, 20 billion out of his government. So I put that in a time frame. I expect if you had a Labor Greens coalition, they'd put another zero on that one pretty quick. He's talked about, you would have heard, technology, not taxes. And I would say, okay, that's great. So no carbon tax, but I'd suggest that what's not said is there's plenty of subsidies and targets in there as well. Now he also said,
afford any of this. Just by the way, we actually can't afford any of this. But carry on, yeah.
Yeah, well, considering we're kept afloat by our resource and energy exports, I agree. And he said there's no change to industry, and I say, well, what about the coal power industry? That's a fairly significant one as well. So I've got a if you look at myself in the context of the world today, I'm pretty much a right-wing extremist. I hold views such as market principles, level playing fields, proportionate response, balanced opinion, cost-benefit analysis. I think all this would benefit the energy discussion.
Let's hear what that right-wing nutjob Katharine Murphy from The Guardian has to say. I'm being facetious, of course, when I say that. This is quite amusing.
This is literally whether we live or die, whether or not life can be sustained on the planet, and whether or not the level of prosperity that I have enjoyed, that Adam has enjoyed, that we hope to bequeath to our kids continues. We are one of the most carbon-intensive economies in the world. We are sitting ducks, literally, in this whole debate.
In my mind, it's funny, but we've discussed my sense of humour before. I think if other people heard it, they might think she's a little unhinged. When you look at any scientific report or anyone who delves into the science behind the climate discussion, none of them say that. Everyone says it's the warming is going to be marginal, somewhat beneficial, and certainly the planet is not going to become unlivable.
The worst modelling doesn't even say that, and some of the modelling, I've got an MBA. I don't have a Master's of Science, right? But I did financial modelling, and I can tell you put data in, you want to get the outcome, you'll get the outcome you want if you put the right data in the front end. And a lot of this scientific modelling is not science. And I think people need to understand the difference between modelling and actual science. I mean, we're trying to get as close as we can to what we think might happen with the modelling. But when you've got organisations doing the modelling that have a political agenda or have a business agenda, like the renewables industry does, then it becomes, or a political agenda, like a lot of people behind all of this do, then it becomes very, very questionable indeed as to whether these models are actually trustworthy. What worries me about Katharine Murphy, mate, is not that people think she's crazy, but that people don't, that young people are influenced by that and they get very nervous and anxious, and we see mental illness on the rise in the young because they believe the world's not going to survive. Someone who I find fascinating, is Simon Holmes Accord, partly because of his father, made a mint out of mining, the mining industry, and that's where the family wealth comes from. But he's very big in the renewables movement, as is the son of Malcolm Turnbull, and you often see them on Twitter in the same circles. Tell me a little bit about what Simon Holmes Accord's been saying of late.
Well, he's wherever he gets a voice, wherever he pops up, whether it's ABC Radio or ABC TV or anything else, ABC, he very, very much talks up this doomsday scenarios, and he very much talks up the ability of wind and solar to solve those problems, and he very much talks down anything else.
What is Glasgow about? It's not about net zero. Glasgow is about the Paris Agreement, and the Paris Agreement is about keeping global warming to less than 2 degrees, well less than 2 degrees, preferably 1.5. And if we don't manage to do that, we may as well say goodbye to the reef. The unprecedented fire events that we've had recently will become every other year, and large parts of Australia will become both uninsurable and unlivable. Glasgow is about the Paris Agreement, not about net zero.
Okay, that was Simon Holmes Accord on that fabulously balanced ABC program Q&A. The Q&A show was hilarious, but let's just pause for a moment. Of course, as we know well, you can't have wind and solar without some sort of reliable backup power being generated, and that has to come from some technology other than wind and solar. And at the moment, we look at coal, we look at gas, but there's also the big solution to come out of net zero 2050 for Australia, and certainly came out of COP26 quite strongly, I understand, Ben, is hydrogen. I want to talk a little bit about hydrogen and the effect of that. How does hydrogen work to solve our energy supply problems?
So if you listen to the renewables lobby and the Greens lobby, it's a panacea to everything, right? But as we're here on the other side, I tend to disagree with that outlook. Firstly, let's consider Europe. They're coming into a severe winter with what is widely described as an energy crisis. So you've got increasing demand, low stockpiles, and risky suppliers, especially if you're supplying gas into Europe from
Russia.
Russia. I was going to say less stable countries, but
not exactly reliable.
Stable. Yeah. There's for viewers who are interested, they can find a really good Matthew Warren article from the AFR a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And if you just go and search for Europe energy crisis, you'll certainly get the lowdown from Reuters and Bloomberg, the BBC, and everyone else. So what's Australia doing about it, and how are we going to save the world? Well, energy superpower, hydrogen superpower, hydrogen. In ScoMo's plan, there's a really interesting graphic, figure ES.3. And what it does, it talks about, on one side, it says, what are your energy sources? And on the other side, it says, what are your energy users? And there's a big gap in the middle. Currently, it's coal and gas, bit of hydro. What it will be, according to the plan, is clean hydrogen. Now, hydrogen's been made around the world for donkey's years. I mean, NASA used liquid hydrogen to put rockets into space. You've got the fertilizer industry, and a few other things, but it's not, that production and that demand does not exist in the quantities that we're talking about in these new ideas. And a really easy example is looking at Twiggy Forrest. So he's on record as saying he expects Australia to produce 15 million tons of hydrogen by 2030. When you look at what the type of hydrogen they're talking about, they're only talking about hydrogen via electrolysis, which is using electricity and passing electricity through a membrane full of water, and at the other side you get hydrogen and oxygen. So that's a very energy intensive way of producing hydrogen, and in fact the energy you get out of that process is less than the energy you put into it. In my dark, cynical mind, I wonder why we're being pushed into less energy dense sources like wind and solar, which cost more per unit than other things. When you consider you need energy 100% of the time, and wind and solar only produce about 30% of the time. Then you look at...
so let's just backtrack there for 1 second, my friend. Did you just say that it takes more energy to produce than it produces?
That's correct. Yep.
That wouldn't sound like a very effective or efficient way of solving the problem. How are we going to produce hydrogen? What energy are we going to use to be producing this hydrogen?
Excellent questions. This is what I would ask. I would ask journalists to please ask Mr. Forrest and
our fine journalists. Yes,
I would just ask them to please ask Twiggy next time they've got him. I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunities over the coming years. How much electricity Mr. Forrest's green hydrogen is going to consume. So when you do the sums, and the sums are available in a few places, one of the best ones is CSIRO's National Hydrogen Roadmap. In the back of that, they give you all the values and efficiencies and capacity factors and all the assumptions that go into their modeling.
All right. Well, you're the energy engineer, so you understand all of that stuff. And you're telling us that it's going to cost more energy to produce 1 unit of energy from hydrogen. Right. Why would we be doing it? It's kind of like a very slow battery storage process.
Well, the why is depending on your perspective. If you're selling it, you're doing it to save the world. But if you're in there building electrolyzer factories like Twiggy, he's obviously saying there's going to be some money in it for him. When you look at how much hydrogen we actually need we're going to be producing versus how much electricity it's going to consume. So I'll run these by you. If you take all of Australia's wind and solar, including rooftop solar capacity right now, and that's after 20 years of subsidies and targets and taxpayer funding, we'd produce 1 million tons of green hydrogen using that supply. So that's 1 million tons.
If we used all of our solar power.
If you just, like, for argument's sake, took that amount of capacity, put it through a electrolyzer and came up with hydrogen. And this is not talking about storage or transport or anything like that. Right. This is just actually the numbers to make it.
Oh God. Okay.
Yeah. So if you wanted to make 15 million tons of hydrogen, you would need 15 times the amount of wind and solar that Australia currently has installed. This is the crazy thing, right? Because you look at it and I can see your face. You're like, hang on a second. But this is, if you start doing the sums on hydrogen, you got to check yourself, because the numbers are ludicrous. It gets
so it quite clearly doesn't add up, no matter what you think, and yet nobody's asking these questions about this. We're moving in this direction.
I'd like people to start asking these questions, especially when they've got say Twiggy Forrest and Anna Palaszczuk, Matt Keane, who else is there? Simon Holmes à Court, the Mike Cannon-Brookers, all these people. I'd like them to say, how many tons of hydrogen are we going to use, and how are you going to produce it? How much electricity is it going to take? And when they start saying, well, if you want to make, like Alan Finkel, oh dear, he's quoted in The Australian as saying, and I'll read it out, imagine a world where Australia, 20 or 30 years in the future, is producing as much hydrogen in energy equivalent terms as our 2020 LNG exports. So if you take those numbers and you do a few back calculations, if you want to make 37 million tons of hydrogen gas, and then liquefy it, that's another energy component. Right. You're looking at sort of 10 times the total Australian electricity demand of everything.
Okay. All right.
So this is just in context, it doesn't make any sense. And no one around the world is exporting large amounts of hydrogen, green hydrogen. No one's making large amounts of green hydrogen. No one's storing large amounts of green hydrogen. And certainly no one's using large amounts of green hydrogen.
So it's brand new technology as well. Do we have no expertise or knowledge?
Well, it's not that it's new. It's just that it's so expensive and so inefficient. The numbers don't lie on it. I mean, the modeling in CSIRO, et cetera, says, there'll be electrolyzers will come down in efficiency by, some crazy number. They'll come down in cost by some crazy number. But yeah, I mean, in my Spectator article, I went through it. Now, when you look at the amount of green hydrogen they want, and then you look at how much wind and solar, because remember, this is Australia. We're not allowed to have nuclear, or we can't really have much hydro. It's all got to be wind and solar. if you look at how much wind and solar is required to produce any significant amount of hydrogen, then you soon understand why the renewable energy lobby is very keen on it.
So, Ben, we'll put the link to your article in the program notes, your Spectator article on this, so people can check all of that out for themselves. All right, Ben, now I know in your energy research in the last week or so, you've come across some interesting comments from a key player in the domestic home solar energy area.
Yeah, that's right. So again, on the Renew Economy podcast, and with all my criticisms of Renew Economy, they do a good job with their podcast. They get some interesting guests on. I'd have them asking slightly different questions though.
They should get you on. That would be good.
That'd be interesting. You have Mike Cannon-Brookers, obviously very successful businessman, quite vocal about green energy and the like. And it's for those of us who are interested in the debate, his explanation of the economics of rooftop solar are worth listening to.
This is Mike Cannon-Brookers, and he's owns a leading domestic solar company, I understand, right?
Yeah, I think he mentions Bright Solar in the podcast.
Okay.
Bright can finance household solar so efficiently and at very reasonable cost because the returns are known. We know the panels are going to last 20 years. We can tell you exactly how much you're going to save on your bill pretty much, and hence we can find it. We lend you the money to save on your bills.
Okay, so Ben, that sounds pretty reasonable. What's your concern about that?
Well, Mike, he's the things he says. I think you could say they're largely correct. It's the things he doesn't say, which sort of put it into context. So I would argue to that and say, well, how much rooftop solar has been subsidized by state and federal targets and straight up grants and taxpayer subsidies in the last 20 years? And I'd say pretty much all of it. I think you'd be hard pressed to find any which are not. So
we're basically being rewarded as consumers for shifting off dirty energy, or so-called dirty energy, onto rooftop solar.
Yeah,
but it's costing the taxpayer.
Well, I think the arguments for subsidising rooftop solar are done. There's been a few different reports come out. So the ACCC in 2018 recommended ramping them back. And there was another one from Queensland a couple of years before that, which said that they'd done their job. So the job of a government subsidy or a target is to de-risk a fledgling industry and potentially help it stand on its own 2 feet. Now, I don't think anyone, even around the world, would describe rooftop solar as a fledgling industry anymore.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Thank you very much for your time. Very much appreciated, Ben. And we look forward to seeing you in 2022 for more insights into the politics and economics of the energy situation in our world. Thank you, Ben Beattie. Have a great Christmas.
Thanks, Damian. You too.
As I mentioned earlier, the other side will be sadly leaving the Discernable platform at the end of 2021, hopefully returning somewhere in 2022 after the election on our own platforms, in which I'll be now running in the federal election, of course, as a Liberal Democrats candidate for the seat of Ryan in Brisbane. And I'm running to win because we have to bring real experience from outside of the political inner circle of Canberra elites to save this country. During the election campaign, I'll be posting lots of random short videos and commenting on stuff. So right now, if you'd please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at TheOtherSideOz and or on Facebook at facebook.com/TheOtherSideOz, or just search us up. Then be sure to click follow on Twitter to follow us and like on the Facebook page. The Facebook page looks like this. Now, we do strongly recommend that you continue to follow Discernible. Matt's still going to be producing some great stuff on both YouTube and Facebook. But if you're landing on a page that says Discernible, it isn't actually The Other Side anymore. So we do need you to go onto our own separate page. So you've got to find those pages. Be sure to stay in touch with me throughout 2022. It's going to be a lot of fun. During the campaign, I'll be posting behind the scenes stuff so you can see what a campaign is like. And then if you could kindly subscribe to us on YouTube, our YouTube page looks like this one. And again, you need to find our page, not our folder on the Discernible page. You've got to find the Other Side Australia page and subscribe directly to that and click the bell so you get notified when we put up new content. I really look forward to keeping in touch throughout 2022, and don't forget that you can always join our VIP WhatsApp list and have links sent to your phone when I upload new content. Just drop us an email at theothersideost@gmail.com, theothersideost@gmail.com, and we'll send you the link to opt in on WhatsApp. Written and authorised by Damian Coory from Wong, Queensland.